understanding that there is at least a prima facie or a prima facie case against the employee. Would that be correct?
Yes, precautionary suspension is on full pay, full benefits, with the exception that you would not be allowed to report for duty, and you may have got to surrender certain items belonging to the employer. For maybe those things will also be subjected to, the same investigation and so on.
The point I'm making is that you must be satisfied at the very least that the person, that there's a prima facie case against the person.
That's correct.
So, against that backdrop, what is the purpose? Because according to your terms of reference, you've instructed Worksmans to conduct an assessment or to conduct a process. They are entitled to interview witnesses in order to establish whether there is a prima facie case against General Martin Sabia.
Look, that work was also running concurrently. If for instance, what I said was, I'm putting you on suspension, but I'm also instituting an investigation. So the investigation by Worksman, it's part of this work that needed to happen. Now, remember that I think I must have also indicated that in the letter that I sent to General Dramat and others, that the precautionary suspension, I think in the public service is defined within 60 to 90 days, something like that. So it was my intention that within a shorter period, as much as possible, of about 60 to 90 days, you can't keep the fate of a human individual hanging in the air. Because I think, Chair, as I had alluded to earlier on, that some of the things that concerned me, not only just with the police, but also even in some other areas in government wherever I worked, is the question of, somebody who stays at home for 2 years on suspension, 4 years on suspension, 7 years on suspension, and so on. It doesn't make sense. So it's the swiftness that is necessary in regard to cases such as this. And that's why it was important that you put somebody on suspension, but start your investigation so that you establish the facts within a shorter period of time as possible. If there is nothing to be pursued in regard to the person that you have put on suspension, that person comes back to work. But if there are matters that have got to be pursued, then you subject that person to a disciplinary process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Now, you obtained the Worksman's report sometime in late April of 2015. Is that correct?
Maybe. I haven't checked the date.
If you return with me to exhibit bundle LEA1, Mr. Chair, and the specific exhibit is...
LEA1.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I've got LEA1 here.
And this is exhibit Y8A.
Sorry.
You've attached to that, your affidavit, you've attached the Worksman's report.
What page did you say?
The specific page number is page 187, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Did you
say 187?
187.
87.
87, that is
Oh,
correct.
the last page
It's the very last page of the
of the
Worksman.
workman's report. Okay.
It's dated the 24th of April 2015. Now that's approximately when you would have received it, is that correct?
Yeah, as I said, Mr. Halley, it's whether it was this date or soon thereafter, I wouldn't know, but I wouldn't have the specifics really.
And then arising out of that report, you've now received the report. Arising out of it, I would imagine that you would have considered the report, satisfied yourself as to its contents and the implications. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you would then have taken a decision about what to do with the report. Is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Now we know that a criminal investigation was then instituted against Mr. Robert McBride, Mr. Sissoko, and Mr. Kuba. Is that correct?
Yeah, I heard about them.
And the Worksman's report had made a recommendation that a criminal prosecution should be, or that a criminal case should be opened against them. Is that right? Well, perhaps we should read the report to be of assistance rather than to misquote. Let's turn to page 186 of that bundle. Look at paragraph 6.4.5. It says, in the absence of any information as to which of the three co-signatories were responsible for the deletion of information from the first report, we recommend that Kuba, McBride, and Sissoko be charged criminally for defeating the ends of justice or obstructing the administration of justice, and that disciplinary charges be brought against them in their capacities as employees. As a fact, they were charged criminally. Is that right?
No, I heard about them being charged, yes.
Well, were you the impetus, or were you the basis upon which, well, let me rephrase that. Did you open a charge against them?
No, I don't run criminal investigations, sir.
Pardon me?
I did not run criminal investigations. Let's say in my capacity then as minister.
No, fair enough. But I think anybody can open a criminal case. So the question to you is not
I guess the question is, did you lay a complaint that led to their criminal prosecution?
No, I think what must have happened is that the Worksman, I nearly said Worksman compensation.
The workmen's attorneys.
No, Worksman compensation, there used to be something like that at some point.
Yes.
But the Worksman investigation report, it made a variety of recommendations, so I must have referred it to different sort of units also to look at areas that were relevant and or applicable to them or something. Yes.
In fact, if you would turn with me to bundle LEA 7.
Are you moving on to another point, or you're
It's
still?
the same point.
Oh, okay.
We're just exploring something further, Mr. Chief.
Of course.
If you would, pardon me, Mr. Chair.
What page?
It's at page 3211.
3 to 11.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. It's part of a docket, and it's exhibit Y8G.
Yes.
If you could turn with me, Mr. Nhleko, to page 3211. Do you have the document?
No, I'm following you, though. So if you can just read it out
Yes,
to me.
I think he will be able to follow you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a sworn statement by a certain Lieutenant Colonel Y.
Wine.
Yes.
Okay.
Kwai, I think. I'm just mentioning, putting it that way, in case if it's pronounced in the way that I think it might be. It's just that I don't know whether it's isiZulu or not, but if it is isiZulu, it would be Kwai.
Oh, okay.
But it might not be isiZulu, so.
Yeah.
But you may or may not know who the person is, so I thought you might know whether you know the person.
Oh, I thought Mr. Halu was just mentioning that there is this statement, but I haven't had the question. Really.
Okay.
Now, the sworn statement particularly seems to be, it's marked as A1 in the docket, which from the instructions that I've received means that it's the very first statement in the docket. It's the statement usually of the complainant. That's the statement that gives rise to the charge sheet, or rather to the docket being opened.
Oh. No, I hear you, and I'm following, sir.
Now, he says in paragraph 3 of his statement, he says, I've been duly mandated to depose to, well, he actually says dispose, but I imagine he says depose. He intended to say depose to this affidavit by the acting national head of the DPCI, General Bernin Ntlameza, in my capacity as the office manager in the office of the national head DPCI. Mm-hmm. My duties entail, among other functions, dealing with the correspondence that needs the attention of the national head or has been dealt with by the national head DPCI. During the performance of my duties, I have on the 8th of May 2015 received correspondence from the Ministry of Police as signed by the Honourable Minister of Police, Mr. N.P.T. Nhleko, to the effect of submission of the report compiled by the Worksman's IPID Investigation Commission into Zimbabwean renditions. The report therefore elucidates some inconsistencies relating to 2 reports associated to a single IPID investigation on the issue of Zimbabwean nationals that were subjected to rendition, thus giving rise to an investigation of perjury, corruption, and defeat in the ends of justice by either the IPID deponents that were interviewed, compilers of first and second IPID reports. Now, are you familiar with the background leading up to this docket being opened?
No, I'm not. There's something that you read out there which I find strange. I mean, I wouldn't write as Minister of Police to somebody that I don't know, and somebody who's not the duly delegated person of the institution in question. So I wouldn't do that. So the person who deposed that affidavit, you said it's a Mr. or Miss what? Why?
Why?
Yeah, I wouldn't know that person.
Well, the person is saying
So the person says, I wrote to him or her, isn't it?
He says, during the performance of my duties, I have on the 8th of May, 2015, received correspondence from the Ministry of Police as signed by the Honorable Minister of Police, Mr. NPT Nhleko, to the effect of submission of the report compiled by the Worksman's IPID Investigation Commission into Zimbabwean renditions.
There's something wrong with this formulation. Because there's a presupposition that I must have written to this individual.
Well, certainly
unless
what
this
the
person
individual
says,
suggests is that there is correspondence that came from you, whether it was directed to him or to somebody else, but he refers to correspondence from
Right.
you. But I'm not sure if it's clear whether the correspondence was directed to him or to somebody else, but he refers to some correspondence from you.
Yeah, unless it's somebody who introduces himself or herself, let's say as a registry clerk of something, somebody who receives correspondence and says, this is what I've received.
Well, he occupies, it doesn't occupy, I think is he a lieutenant colonel?
If, Mr. Chair, if you would consider the
He's a
last
lieutenant
page.
colonel in the South African Police stationed at DPCI investigation offices in Silverton, Pretoria at that time.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's something that would have to
Would
be...
you like to see the particular
No,
correspondence?
it actually doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's just that I think it's something that that requires further clarification at a later point, because there's no way that I would write to somebody who's not the head of the institution.
Well,
I don't think
it
it's
may
like
be
that.
that you wrote to the head of the DPCI, but and that correspondence was in the file that was given to this person for purposes of preparing the
Supposedly
affidavit.
by the head of DPCI.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is possible. I don't know whether Mr. Halley, you would think
Yes, I
that
can
as well.
be of assistance in that respect. If we could turn to page 3209, which is 2 pages before that.
.3209, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the letter that he's referring to, which is a letter dated the 8th of May 2015, which has your name at the bottom and is addressed to the acting head of the DPCI, General Nklemeza. And it reads, as the Minister of Police, I commissioned an investigation into the existence of the so-called 2 IPID investigation reports on renditions of Zimbabwean nationals. Such an investigation was concluded by Worksman's attorney on the 24th of April of 2015. This report is therefore referred to you for your consideration as it implicates some officials of the DPCI.
Okay.
That's the document.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I seem to
that
be.
makes sense.
Yeah, now I seem to be having at least some sense, an administrative sense of perhaps what might have happened.
Yeah, okay.
It's just that earlier on, Chair, it sounded like I must have written to this Mr. Y or Miss Y. You know, and that was my confusion then, but I'm clarified. Thanks.
Well, what I was trying to ascertain is this was written to General Nklemeza because it concerned the officers under his command or people within his area under the DPCI, correct?
Right. Correct.
It says that it implicates some officials of the DPCI. Specifically, it seems to be referring to, amongst others, General Ramat, General Sabia, correct?
Yeah, I'll take your formulation, amongst others.
I think there may also be a certain Captain Maluleka,
All right.
but Those would be the 3 people from the DPCI who had been implicated in the Worksman's report.
Just 1 second, Mr. Halley. We did say we aim to try and finish at 3, or I did say we would try and finish at 3. Mr. Mkhari had indicated yesterday that his re-examination should not be longer than 30 minutes. May I just find out whether that's still the position? He agrees. So it seems that you may have to aim to finish not later than 2:30.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Now, what I'm trying to understand is how the people were implicated over here, and the purpose of the report related, of course, to the DPCI. It was given to them for their purposes.
Right.
And if you're not in a position to assist us, of course, by all means say so, but I'm trying to understand how we went from that to a criminal investigation that is opened against IPID officials. If you can be of assistance.
No, I think, Mr. Halley, I would not be able to assist you there. Yeah, I wouldn't.
Can I take you back while Mr. Halley is looking at something to the decisions that you may have made with regard to or arising from the workman's report? Did you make any decision of a disciplinary nature arising out of that report? And if so, in regard to whom? Like deciding to suspend, or that somebody must face a disciplinary hearing, must face disciplinary charges? Did you make any decision, any decisions like that arising based on that report?
Amongst others, I think it was certainly the suspension of Mr. McBride, arising
of Mr. McBride.
Of Mr. McBride, yes, arising out of that very same report.
Yes.
And of course, I think the relevant levels of authority then dealt with others, but at my level, it was the question of Mr. McBride, I think, out of that report.
So in terms of any decision to suspend anybody arising out of that report, the only decision to suspend somebody that you took based on that report was to suspend Mr. McBride. He was the only one in terms of the decision to suspend by yourself, not by somebody else.
No, he was suspended by myself, yes.
But okay. Mr. Kuba and Mrs. Sissoko would have been suspended by somebody else.
By somebody else, yes.
Yes, yeah. And in terms of whether any criminal investigation should be pursued, did you make any decision? Now, I accept that you are not the prosecutors, you are not in the NP, you are not in the NPA, but did you make any decision along the lines that the criminal justice system must, here is the report, they must make whatever decision they might wish to make?
Look, the report, Chair, has referred to different sort of arms within the police service. They also needed to read it, analyze it on the basis of their area of function.
Yes.
And then decide what it is that needed to happen. And I'm happy that the Chair qualifies this point that, of course, I've got nothing to do with the NPA.
Yeah.
But also the NPA itself will not, on the basis of merely a report out there in public, then decide, no, we're prosecuting.
Yeah,
so
make their own investigation.
Yes. So the arms of investigation, such as the police, whichever level it would be, would then be involved to look into that, and then look at how they work with the NPA in the construction of charges, if any.
Yes.
You know.
Let's talk about your decision to suspend Mr. McBride. Mr. McBride was not a signatory to the first report. That's right. He was not a signatory to the first report.
Right.
Indeed, the first report had been given to the NPA before he joined IPID.
Right.
Yeah. Now, what was your understanding of what you thought he had done wrong, even if that was not a final determination, just prima facie, that really needed to be investigated, given that he signed the second report only and had not been there. He had not expressed or associated himself in any way with any views or analysis that may have been part of the first report on 22 January, because he was not part of IPID at that time. So I up to a certain point, I do have some understanding of concern in relation to Mr. Kuba, who had signed the first report which said one thing and signed the second report which said something contradictory. But I'm not sure that I understand in regard to Mr. Sissogo and Mr. McBride, who only signed one report, namely the final report. So you being the person who made the decision to suspend Mr. McBride, I would like you to assist me to understand in your own mind what did you see as prima facie wrong as far as he was concerned?
Honorable Chair, two things. The first one is that the contention here is not about signing. Okay, it's not about signing. And of course, you know, it's a different set of a debate in terms of regulations and applicable laws and whatever. So that's a different thing. But you know what we seem to be forgetting is that we're all governed by principles of accountability. For an example, if I were to follow the analogy by the chair, it would also apply to me to then say, what do I have to do with the generation of a report by the Civilian Secretariat for Police, which was done in 2012, because I was not there. I only became minister in 2014. So which would mean any other work done before I came in, it's what I don't inherit. You know, I don't identify with it. In fact, I don't even want it. Government can't work like that. So
no, I don't think it's the same thing. Maybe okay. Let me take you one step further. What do you say to the proposition that says, yes, as far as Mr. McBride was concerned, he had regard to whatever he had regard to and came to the conclusion that the report that comes to you that is associated with him must contain an analysis that he was happy with and the recommendations that he felt he could justify. If the earlier report had a recommendation that he felt he could not be justified, or had an analysis that he felt could not justify, he may have said, well, this one that will have my signature must contain what I can also stand for, what I can justify. Now, what's wrong with that?
I'll tell you what's wrong with that.
Yes.
Chair. Firstly, it takes us back to this issue of you have a report that is in there, you don't nullify it, and therefore you generate another one. But the one that you're generating looks similar to the first one, but materially you have tampered with it. That's the issue. Now, in fact, the investigation clearly shows that there was no additional information in the second report. In fact, what happened is that there was certain paragraphs and content, material content for that matter, expunged from the first report to construct the second report.
But when you say that, what comes across to me is you are disagreeing with Mr. McBride's approach. You are disagreeing with his analysis. You are disagreeing with his recommendation. You say, I don't agree with this analysis. I don't agree that what was in the first report, those paragraphs should not also be in this report. But he has taken a different view. I'm just putting a possible argument. He has taken a different view. So what's wrong with taking a different view?
No.
Do you punish somebody because they have a different view?
I'm not.
I want you to assist me where, where I need clarification.
Yeah.
So in other words,
I think it's possible, Chair, that you might be missing a point somewhere.
Yes.
A report, an investigation report, is not about views. It's not about.
But surely, when they make recommendations, those are views.
Can I finish, Honorable Chair? The investigation report is not about views. What constitutes an investigation report are statements collected, sworn to statements, collected from individuals, analyzed to produce that report. So it's not about views. With my view is that this and so on. So if you have statements that clearly, whether it's one or two individuals, that implicate you in relation to allegations of the commission of crime, for an example. So you can't then say, I have a view about these sworn statements that actually you may not have committed that crime. It doesn't work that way. Now, and that's why, Chair, it's quite important, and I think I tried to emphasize this point on the first day, that all of us, we need to respect processes, because institutional processes, they are there to assist us. That's another level, for an example, which must determine your extent of involvement and or guiltiness, for an example, that must establish that. But on the basis of what is there, these are the implications and so on. So, much as I hear the Chair from that point of view, but we shouldn't make it out as if it's, a general sort of analytical kind of report, necessarily. it is born out of what is contained in the docket and all dockets.
Yes, you see, I have an issue with your evidence that a report such as that is not about views.
Okay.
I expect you to agree to this proposition that says, when an investigator, including an IPET investigator, has been given the task of investigating something, and they collect evidence, they collect statements from witnesses, and they're supposed to see whether there should be prosecution, or they should make a recommendation for prosecution or for misconduct, disciplinary action. They take a view on the content of the statement to say, what do I make of this evidence? Do I think this evidence reveals that this person committed a crime, that this person acted in breach of the rules of the employer? That's the view they take. And when they make a recommendation, and the IPET Act says they must make recommendations, that recommendation is the view they take. Somebody else might say, given this evidence in these statements, I recommend that so and so should be disciplined. Somebody else might say, given the same evidence, I recommend that this person should not be disciplined. So that's where I'm coming from, and you will get a chance to say you agree or not, but I expect you to agree. But I'm therefore saying, when it comes to Mr. Sissoko and Mr. McBride, it seems to me, and I want you to tell me if I'm looking at it wrongly, it seems to me that there is room to say they expressed, to the extent that they were party to the final report, they may have expressed views. Some of those views or their approach might have differed from Kuba's approach alone writing that other report, and you didn't agree with their approach in the second report. You didn't agree. Your view was that they should have included certain paragraphs that they thought should be excluded, but it's the view they took. And if it's the view they took, must they be punished for the view they took? So what do you say to that proposition?
Honorable Chair, I would have really loved to agree and share your proposition, but I don't. And I'll probably also try and provide a simplified sort of, example to try and illustrate this point. If you go out here in Johannesburg and you cross a red robot, now a traffic officer will stop you and will tell you, if you're lucky, but it will tell you that this is a violation of crossing a red robot and in violation of the Ordinance Act of 1960, whatever the case is, and so on, right? That's not a view. That's not a view. So you can't then say this traffic cop expressed a view which is different from me as a driver or from me as an onlooker to then say, yeah, he might have crossed the road robot and perhaps it's possible that he did not, and so on. No. So I'm saying institutions of policing in particular, Honorable Chair, they function against institutional regimes. In this case, your Criminal Procedure Act, your whatever act. Of course, I'm not an expert when it comes to these things, Chair. I was merely a political head of the institution, but it doesn't make me a policeman. But they will tell you, and they're professionals that are trained in this regard, okay? So you can't then say, those people having done so, again, in the background of our minds, having made this example about the traffic cop and say that was an expression of a view. No, it's not a view. In legal and criminal matters, and perhaps a view, I think at the level of yourself, Honorable Chair, as a judge, I mean, you can, in analyzing the law and so on, but these are law enforcement agencies. That's all that they do.
That's very interesting you say that because remember, a police officer who sees what he may think, she may think is a violation or contravention of a traffic regulation or law,
yes, sir,
may come to you and say, why are you doing this? Why are you crossing the road? And if you give him or her a certain answer, he may decide, no, I understand this, so therefore I'm not going to arrest you, I'm not going to charge you. You say people are chasing me, wanting to shoot me, so that's why I'm running away from them. If you give them a different answer, they might say, no, there's no valid reason, you'll have to face charges. But I think let's not take it further. I understand what you say, and I think you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Mr. Halley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Now, you, if I understand your testimony correctly, you decided to take disciplinary charges against Mr. arising out of the Worksman's report, to take disciplinary institute disciplinary charges against Mr. McBride, but not against anybody else. Do you understand that correctly?
I took disciplinary steps against Mr. McBride.
And who else?
Against Mr. McBride.
Anybody else other than Mr. McBride?
I think he said nobody else. Yeah, nobody else.
Oh, sorry, I thought he said, sorry,
Yeah, others may have been
apologies.
suspended, but it was not his decision. That's what he said.
What about General Dramat, General Sabia, Captain Maluleka, any of those?
No, the others would be outside of my ambit, really. Of course, General Dramat, I had already indicated to that. But with regards to the others below him, it had to be somebody else, not me.
Now, what I'm trying to understand as far as this is concerned, you commissioned a report to investigate whether there were criminal and whether there was disciplinary misconduct on the part of a variety of people. Those people included Mr. Sissoko, Mr. Kuba, Captain Maluleka, and General Sabia. All outside of your mandate, or all outside of your scope of, as the employer, outside of your ability, your power to discipline them. Correct?
Yes, some of the individuals that you mentioned.
All or some?
No, I'm saying some of the individuals.
Which ones do you disagree with? Which ones do you disagree with? I've named 4.
Just run down that list again.
I think Mr. McBride was the one person.
Yes.
He said he had power to suspend. Mr. General Dramat was another person that would have fallen within his power, but by the time I think he had suspended him earlier than the Workman's report.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think there was anybody else who fell within your power to suspend. Is that so? Among the people mentioned.
And I think we should also qualify this, Chair. General Dramat, it was more to do with being implicated in the commission of crime.
Yeah, not
right?
in the
but
report.
Then not the question of the two reports and so on. And I think we need to be able to draw the line between the two, Chair. Thanks.
In the terms of reference, you were concerned firstly about the rendition matter, and that involved General Dramat, General Sabia, Captain Maluleka, and perhaps other individuals. But you identified two specifically. You spoke about General Dramat and General Sabia.
Yeah.
You were also concerned about the circumstances which gave rise to the amendment of the IPID report. And as far as that was concerned, you were concerned particularly about the fact that there were three people, and that was Mr. McBride, Mr. Sabia, and Mr. Sissoko and Mr. Kuba. Correct?
That I was concerned about what?
In relation to the two reports.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
Now, what I'm trying to understand is how you, on what basis you commissioned an investigation or into misconduct. Let's focus specifically on misconduct. Into misconduct of people who did not fall under your power or authority to discipline.
Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with investigating, and in the investigation, people that you do not have a direct supervision on are implicated. So you wouldn't say, oh yeah, these people are implicated, but because I have nothing to do with direct supervision over them, so they should not be subjected to disciplinary hearing. That would be incorrect. In fact, remember that in the position that I was in, I was responsible in overall of the portfolio. So if I felt that, not even felt, because I remember the chair and I, we were talking about feelings and views. So I must be careful in terms of what I say here. So you have an investigation that then points out that in the division or the unit that I am supervising, you have an XYZ kind of person who is alleged to have committed the following whatever. Now, you refer that matter to the supervisor concerned. You say, here is a report that says the employee that you're supervising is implicated in the commission of an offense, a certain offense, or misconduct, and so on. And that person, manager and supervisor of that employee, would then need to roll out a process of dealing exactly with that issue. Okay. So, but there's nothing wrong in identifying that, there's, there's either report or whatever that identifies the people that are not even supervising, who are part of, who are implicated in the commission of an offense and so on. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's a difference, for your benefit, Mr. Harley, there's a difference between what I've just said and I then saying, I'm now issuing disciplinary charges against those employees that are being supervised by this other employee that falls under my supervision. You know, there's a difference between the two. Thanks very much, Chair.
You see, the difficulty is the investigation wasn't exclusively into Mr. Robert McBride's alleged misconduct or Lieutenant General Dramat's alleged misconduct.
Mm-hmm.
You were investigating, or your terms of reference made it clear that you were investigating several people in the DPCI, which included Dramat, Lieutenant General Dramat, General Sabia, and others within the DPCI. And in relation to IPID, you were investigating not only Mr. McBride, but you wanted others within the IPID to be investigated as well. Would that be fair to say?
No. I think you're wrong, Mr. Halley. Absolutely wrong. We were not investigating certain individuals. We were investigating a circumstance that said, how come you have this report and then you have this one? Right? So, was the manner in which you crafted it's as if, I must have looked at you, Chair, and said, no, I want to investigate you. No, it doesn't work that way. There is a particular circumstance and an occurrence that took place. And the question was, let us establish the facts around this. So, in the process, of course, of the investigation, it then begins to reveal players in the occurrence of a particular circumstance. And it's on the basis of which then a particular institutional process has got to take place. So I wouldn't like Mr. Halley to understand this thing as trying to individualize it and say, no, there were certain individuals and specific people that were being investigated. There was an occurrence.
You see, the difficulty with that is, if I understood correctly, the investigation was specifically twofold. It was an investigation into criminal misconduct, and it was an investigation into disciplinary misconduct. Correct?
Yes, it covered both angles.
And it related to, you wanted to know if there were any people from IPID who were implicated, or any people from IPID who may have been guilty of the criminal or the disciplinary misconduct.
Don't forget your answer. I just want to say we are at 2:25. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Give your answer, Ms. Nhlego.
Can you reformulate that question? No, not reformulate it. Put
You want
the
him to
question
repeat
again.
it? He's asking you to repeat the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's consider the terms of reference.
No, just ask the question, Mr. Halley.
You were
I think
concerned with criminal.
we've gone through the terms of reference, so there's a question that he posed. Now,
Yeah,
that's what I'm interested
My
in.
intervention disturbed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
The purpose of the investigation, insofar as IPID was concerned, you wanted to know specifically what were the circumstances which gave rise to the changing of the report from the first report to the second report. and you were specifically concerned with whether who are the individuals that may have been involved in doing so, and the circumstances which gave rise to the changes, and who are the individuals within IPID that may be guilty of criminal or disciplinary misconduct. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I would have been, given the attitude or the testimony that you've given here today, it would have, and your acknowledgement that you had no power over anybody other than Lieutenant General Dramat or Mr. McBride, I would have expected that the investigation would have been into whether Mr. McBride committed misconduct or whether Lieutenant General Dramat committed misconduct.
Oh, Mr. Hunt, I've responded to that question, sir.
Yes, I think you have.
Yes, I even made examples.
But I think maybe Mr. Halley wants to. You are suggesting, and you want to know whether he has got any comment to your suggestion.
Indeed. It's a proposition that I would obviously, and what you must appreciate, sir, is that...
Because his answer was, there is a situation that had arisen, and it was necessary to establish what happened, how the situation came about, who, if anybody had committed misconduct or an offense, and it so happened that in the course of that investigation, obviously persons who had had a role to play would be asked questions. I think that is what he said. Yeah, I'm putting it in my own way. But Mr. Halley is suggesting that he would have expected you to confine the investigation to the persons who fell within your authority in terms of disciplining, namely Mr. McBride and General Dramat. You may be able to say, I didn't see it that way, or I thought it's necessary to look at everybody that may have had a role to play. Do you want to say anything?
No, I disagree with his proposition. Yes, I actually do. And in fact, even earlier on, I did allude to the mere fact around the issues of oversight responsibility. Yeah. So,
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on what basis, I'm trying to understand this, on what basis, given that you understand, you appreciate that you have no command over, or direct command or operational command over Mr. Kuba, on what basis do you phone him and tell him, instruct him, in fact, to cooperate with the Worksman's investigation?
No, on the basis that there was an investigation and he needed to cooperate with the investigation.
No, I understand that. In the same way that one can phone up anybody else. But the question is, on what authority do you do so?
On the basis of the overall responsibility that I had as mandated by the Constitution and the oversight responsibility of the department.
So your earlier testimony was, yesterday, your testimony was you don't phone people that are lower down in the rung. You phone the person that's at the head of that institution. Now, in the case of IPID, that was Mr. Khamanyani when Mr. McBride was on suspension. So what I'm asking you is, if you wanted an instruction to be given to Mr. Kuba, why didn't you phone Mr. Khamanyani?
No, you're getting it wrong. at the time when I called Mr. Kuba, Mr. Khamanyana was not on the scene. If my recollection, if I'm correct, I mean he was not there. So I think
who was the head?
It was Mr. McBride.
So why did you phone Mr. McBride?
Yeah,
No,
I think that's my
himself.
recollection as well. That's my recollection as well, that it
Yes,
was Mr. McBride.
yes, it was Mr. McBride, who himself was also implicated in the very same issue of the investigation.
That's the point. And the point is that you bypassed Mr. McBride and went straight to Mr. Kuba. And now there could only be one reason why you could have gone directly to Mr. Kuba to instruct him to cooperate with the investigation.
Right.
Because you suspected that Mr. McBride was guilty of some wrongdoing. Correct?
No,
I'm sorry, just repeat the question.
There's only one reason why you would have bypassed Mr. McBride and gone straight to Mr. Kuba, was because you suspected that Mr. McBride was guilty of some wrongdoing.
He suspected that Mr. McBride had done something wrong.
That Mr. McBride was the one that was guilty.
Okay.
But Mr. Halley, you would appreciate this thing. Guilt is never suspected. Guilt is established through processes. So I can't look at you or any other human individual and suspect guilt. It never works that way. However, you could be a person that is implicated in the wrongdoing. And I think those are the guarded kind of terms that are used. But the usage of the concept of suspected guilt defeats the whole notion of why you need to have institutional and or legal processes that must then establish whether you're guilty and to what extent, and whether you're not guilty. That's it. That's my understanding of general practice, basically.
I accept that. You've obviously got to establish it, but one could have a suspicion. Nothing wrong with having a suspicion. Your suspicion could be based on nothing, and of course your suspicion could be based upon something.
Mr. Halley, I think let's agree that we disagree on that.
Let's move on.
I mean, for me, as I say, I mean, you can't suspect guilt. You know, wrongdoing, yes, you can suspect, but not guilt.
Now, the second question is, if you knew that Mr. Kuba you had been told that Mr. Kuba wasn't cooperating, I would imagine that you had also been told that Mr. McBride wasn't cooperating.
Chair, if Mr. Halley can indicate when is he going to finish, because you've given him time, he's just continuing and eating into the re-examination.
Yes, I was also looking whether that was going to be the last question or what. We are at 25 to 3. I'm not saying stop abruptly. What is the situation?
Mr. Chair, if you would bear with me. Yes, I think I'm down to basically two propositions, and then I want to sum it all up.
Is that 5 minutes, or how much is that?
I don't
10
think
minutes?
I think it's, depending on the answers, I would think that it's about 15 or 20 minutes.
Yes, but we've got to come to some conclusion.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. The difficulty, as I said at the outset, is that I'm making an assessment in my head, but then my assessment is based upon a response that would be relatively short.
Well, we have got to come to some
Absolutely.
conclusion. I don't want to say abruptly stop. Well, can you try and see if you can wrap up in 10 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could ask you, sir, to turn with me to your founding affidavit, your affidavit, which is in bundle LEA1.
And I think I can say the 10 minutes is the last 10 minutes. So I just want to make sure that you know that that will be the last 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
That's bundle LEA1, sir. Have you got it?
Well, I think you can go ahead and ask the question. He will decide if he needs it. If he's able to answer without looking at it, he will. I think that's his approach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your affidavit, you deal with the Worksman's report at some length. And I could just refer you to the relevant page.
Remember that you might not need to refer. If you know what is in the page, you can just put the question. He might be able to answer because you probably know what the question is you want to put. So,
well, my understanding arising out of the affidavit was that you had, pursuant to obtaining the Worksman's report, you had decided to institute disciplinary proceedings.
And what was the verb? It says he decided to what?
Institute disciplinary proceedings against the implicated individuals.
Individuals, okay, all right. Mr. Ntlego?
So what is it that needs to be known about that, Chair?
He says, and I'm paraphrasing, you have said that after the Workman's report had been presented to you, the only person that you decided to take disciplinary action against, and here I'm talking about suspension, was Mr. McBride. But he is saying, in your affidavit, you said you decided to take disciplinary action against the implicated individuals, plural.
Yes, Chair, but the point being that the investigation report by Worksman makes a reference to the alleged sort of areas of misconduct by the individuals that are concerned. So I agreed with it, and I agree with it. So this particular paragraph that he makes reference to, it's precisely because I agree with the original recommendation that says disciplinary action must be taken against the following individuals, okay? Now, and I think I've explained earlier on, the whole question of the distinction between disciplinary steps as a supervisor that you take against an employee that reports to you, against the situation where that particular employee takes disciplinary steps against people that report under him. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And after the matter went to the Constitutional Court, this is now, Mr. McBride instituted proceedings in the Constitutional Court to set aside his suspension after you had suspended him, and he did so on the basis that you had no power to do so. Is that correct?
Honorable Chair, I do think that we need to be careful as to how we talk to issues of judgments. We were sitting in front of the Deputy Chief Justice here, who's also part of that very same matter and is part of that very same order. So, Mr. Halley, you would know that the Constitutional Court did not set aside his suspension. And as a matter of fact, there is no, in all the courts that Mr. McBride went to, there was never a pronunciation on the issue of his suspension. Now, the Constitutional Court made the following order, because I think we need to clarify this point.
But I don't think you need to read it. I think your point is it pronounced
6 subsection 3 and other provisions are being, for lack of a better word, are being shifted aside and in their place, in particular section 6 of the IPID Act, section 17 DA of the South African Police Act must be read in there, right? And then said, on the issue of the Minister of Police taking disciplinary steps, that matter, Parliament needed to deal with it within 30 days, and it was for Parliament to then decide whether within the prescribed 30 days by the Constitutional Court, whether it's still, both Parliament and the Minister of Police, whether they still wanted to pursue disciplinary charges against Mr. McBride. So, Mr. Halley, in that order, where is the suspension that is set aside? Because the only thing that happened, by the way, I'll tell you what happened. The only thing that happened, you had an institution of state, a democratic state, that did not follow this order to the letter, and that is Parliament. It elected not to do anything. I mean, it's either you take a position that says, yes, you agree or disagree, but you can't just be mum when it comes to matters of an order such as this. Now, and I think that's where fundamentally also my problem was, and even for that matter, conceptually, I seriously have a problem with a situation such as that. But it happened, okay? Now, the consequence of which was that because the prescribed 30-day period by the Constitutional Court lapsed, there was nothing in law or in any other measure you can think of that then prevented Mr. McBride reporting for duty and going back to work, right? So there was no setting aside of a suspension and no reinstatement, as it has been somewhat alleged
Mr.
in
Chair,
other
if I can just be
courts.
fair,
So
because
that's
that was
what
not
the
the
order
question
says.
I asked.
Yes,
I've
yes.
got a 10-minute response to a question. The question was whether Mr. McBride had instituted proceedings to review and set aside his suspension.
No,
I've been told about the Constitutional Court and what the order.
I disagree with this, because he, in the formulation, Mr. Halley, pointed directly to the question of the Constitutional Court having set aside his suspension. And that's the point that was clarified.
I can't say I remember whether it was that or it was simply saying Mr. McBride brought
Which I said, and
application.
that ultimately
But
went
I don't
to
know
the
if
Constitutional
I don't know how much it matters in terms of what you have in mind, Mr. Halley. If it's important, you can use it to wrap up.
The point is, as you've already pointed out, what the Constitutional Court had ultimately declared was that National Assembly was the body that was responsible to determine whether Mr. McBride could or could not be suspended. Now, it's not your fault, of course, because at the time it indicated, the IPID Act indicated that you did have the power to suspend him.
No, the IPID Act did not indicate. it said the Minister of Police as the following whatever. So it was very pointed. It's not an indication, Mr. Hali.
The powers.
The powers, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then that was done away with by the Constitutional Court. And the
Yes.
Constitutional Court said that those provisions were unconstitutional,
Right.
which meant that you know that whatever powers you might have had or believed you had, you no longer had. And yet you
Right.
continue to pursue the matter. Not only did you approach the National Assembly, having been told by the Constitutional Court that you actually didn't have those powers, not only did you approach the National Assembly to try and advance your case, but when the 30-day period lapsed and Mr. McBride returned, you suspended him again. You wrote a letter saying that the National Assembly must decide where Mr. McBride must go to, correct?
Hey, I don't believe this.
That will be the last question, Mr. Hali.
Yes. Just two things about what Mr. Hali has just said.
I think, in effect, he is saying, is it not true that after Mr. McBride had returned to work, you suspended him again?
No, but he started somewhere.
Yeah, no, he started somewhere.
He then says that he finds almost something wrong with the fact that I approached Parliament. I was approaching Parliament in compliance with the Constitutional Court order. And all I was saying to Parliament, comply with the Constitutional order. This is an order. If an order is issued, we all follow the order. Simple. So you can't subject, for an example, an order to any other set of emotions, whether they're political or something or otherwise. It's an order. So we had to comply with that. Because it said Parliament and Minister of Police must then decide whether they still wanted to pursue this.
Yeah.
So in his formulation, Mr. Hali, that is,
Yes.
He insinuates that there was something wrong with me doing that by approaching Parliament, which is incorrect.
I think I understand your
Yes.
point. I do want to bring this to an end so Mr. Mukhari can re-examine. I did indicate to Mr. Hali that that was to be the last question.
And then
I think I gave him more than the 10 minutes that I said was going to be the last 10 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm quite happy, of course, on your instruction, Mr. Chair, to conclude it at this point. Of course, I did want to afford the witness an opportunity to deal with that.
Yeah.
And, of course, the opportunity, because it's in the affidavit that he's dealt with, that it's part of the, statements that he's dealt with.
No, that's fine. We've got to end here. What's the last point you want to say, Mr.
No, the last point is in relation to Mr. Hali's assertion that not only did I approach Parliament and so on, that even after he returned, I suspended him. That's factually incorrect. Absolutely incorrect.
Yeah.
Indeed, I did then write to the Speaker of Parliament and said, look, in the light of all these issues and the happenings in the manner in which they have happened, they must then, as the institution of Parliament, decide as to how they wanted to deal with that issue. Okay. I had done
the issue
almost...
of suspension.
No, yes, the issue of suspension.
Okay.
Now, I had done almost everything in my power to approach them and said to them, this is what the Constitutional Court says. Let's comply with it. Now, and by so saying, Chair, I was not saying they should not, as Parliament, agree with my position. I was saying they have got to pronounce. Pronounce whether you want to do this thing or not do it. You know, between the two. And I think even the court itself would have then been satisfied that the order was complied with. But you can't just leave it hanging out there and so on. And that's my problem, you know.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, just to be fair to the witness, and of course Mr. Mukhari can deal with it, The relevant passage that I'm referring to is a press statement issued by the witness. It appears in bundle LEA 8, and it's at pages 3639 to 3641.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's fine.
It's dealt with over there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mkhari, re-examination.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I just want to ask Mr. Nhlako just a few questions.
Yes.
Purely for clarification.
Yes.
It's not necessarily a re-examination.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Nhlako, when McBride brought an application in the High Court to declare Section 6, subsection 6, right with Section 6, subsection 3 of the IPID Act unconstitutional, and those were the sections which gave you the power to suspend him and also to institute disciplinary proceedings against the executive director of the IPID. You opposed that application, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
And you filed an answering affidavit.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
And in that application, McBride did make allegations of ulterior motive, and as well as that you were suspending him for, or you're malicious or all those type of things. And you filed an answering affidavit and responding to those allegations in detail. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember, sir.
And what happened to those allegations in court?
He withdrew them.
I didn't hear the answer. Just speak.
I'm saying he withdrew those allegations of ulterior motives, and I think it was ulterior motives and something else, I can't remember. But
yes, that's fine. I just wanted to know then what happened to them. That's all.
No, he withdrew those
yes, that's right.
claims.
Okay, all right. And then the High Court delivered a very lengthy judgment. In essence, it declared Section 6, subsection 6, right with Section 6, subsection 3 of the IPID Act unconstitutional. And on the basis of that, it then found that you had no power to suspend McBride, and similarly, you will have no power to institute disciplinary proceedings against him because those provisions of the law were not consistent with the independence of IPID, which ought to be insulated in it in terms of the Constitution.
Right.
Did the court make any finding against you of ulterior motive?
No, there was no such a finding.
Now, in respect of the suspension, I know that you're not a lawyer, but we have a judgment here, and the chairperson will be able to read it. And the High Court did set aside the suspension of McBride. But what I want you to comment on, what did the court say about his suspension? Did it say that McBride now is free to go back to his position as executive director or did it say something else?
I think the matter, yes, was pronounced upon by the High Court, but pending a constitutional challenge. The effect of which was that the suspension itself was not set aside. But I think I'm subject to correction in case I'm missing something here. But that's
yes, of course. Then I understand that you don't have the judgment with you, and I don't want us to waste time on that. Chairperson, the paragraph of the judgment will be paragraph 77, sub 6 of the judgment. Paragraph 77, sub 6 of the High Court judgment. So all what the High Court said was that although it has set aside McBride's suspension, but McBride must remain on suspension until such time that Parliament has looked into the matter. If indeed the suspension was such of magnitude that McBride ought to return to work, what is it that the court considered that although McBride succeeded in his challenge, he must still remain on suspension?
No, I didn't hear you, Mr. Mukari.
The question is, since the court, that is the High Court now, said that Mr. McBride mustn't return to work until Parliament had dealt with the matter, what are the considerations that led the court to saying that? That was the question.
Yes. Why would the court do such a thing? That's the question.
Of course, the answer would be in the judgment, I would imagine. And I think, Mr. Mukari,
yes, so issues of like the allegations. What was the nature of the allegations? All those type of things. That's
well, I want to say, Mr. Mukari, I want to say, anything that is in the judgment, you are free to just draw my attention to what the court said, even if he doesn't deal with it. If that's what you want to taken into account, you mentioned where
yes,
it
indeed,
is found.
yes. Chairperson, from the High Court judgment, paragraph 60, paragraph 67, 68, and then 77, in particular 77.6. So 60, 67 will then deal with the considerations that the court took into account, but essentially then the court was alive to the fact that the minister pointed out to the nature of the allegations against him, the seriousness, and that McBride himself said that I am prepared to face the disciplinary proceedings. So the issues of the charges, that there was no issue of the charges being frivolous or baseless, then that's what I was trying to put to you, Mr. Hleko.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's because the court had also recognized that the allegations were of a serious nature.
Now, so in terms of our legal system, when the High Court set aside or declare a provision of statute unconstitutional, it doesn't become effective immediately. The Constitutional Court must have a final say, and this matter of McBride was then taken to the Constitutional Court for confirmation. Again, I'm not going to deal with the Constitutional Court judgment because it is there, and then the chairperson will be able to read it. But then what was before the Constitutional Court will be the material that was before the High Court. The paragraph that I'd like to take you to, but again, because of time, I'll read it for you, is paragraph 12. And this was a judgment delivered by, it was written by the late Honorable Busielo A.J. In paragraph 12, it says, faced with the glaring discrepancies in the two reports, the minister suspected serious tampering. As a result, the commission, as a result, he commissioned Worksman's attorneys to investigate the two reports. Relying on the January report and the investigation by Worksman's, the minister invoked his powers in terms of Section 6, subsection 6 of the IPIT Act, the Public Service Act, and Chapter 7 of the SMS Handbook, and placed Mr. McBride on precautionary suspension on 24 March 2015, acting on the strength of Section 66A of the IPIT Act, right with the provisions governing disciplinary proceedings under the Public Service Act and the IPIT regulations. The minister served Mr. McBride with a notice to attend a disciplinary inquiry. So the Constitutional Court, of course, is here mentioning the factual situation. It's not dealing with the law. So the only way the Constitutional Court would have said this is because it found it from the papers, and that's what you have said in your papers. Yes. Am I right? That you're faced with two reports, which are conflicting, and you suspected serious tampering.
No, absolutely so. But also, I think, as I had said before this commission, the Honourable Chair, that from an institutional responsibility point of view, there is no way that you could have ignored the existence of two reports and the disjuncture between the two of them. And therefore, it was important to clarify oneself around this particular issue. And for purposes of clarification, you then had to institute a particular process towards that point of clarity.
Yes, but also importantly, which you also have to know, well, you have touched it when Mr. Hali was asking you questions, but again, because you're not a lawyer, you're not able to know the exact phraseology of the order. The Constitutional Court did confirm the the High Court order. But importantly, I would like to refer you to paragraph, which is now then the paragraph of the order, 58, subparagraph 4, and that is only in respect of the suspension. Then paragraph 4, then it said, it is declared that the decision of the Minister of Police to suspend Mr. Robert McBride from his position as Executive Director of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate is invalid and is set aside. So I just want to make it clear to you that the court did set aside his suspension.
No,
but what follows, but what is important is what follows. That is now paragraph 5. Then in paragraph 5 it says, the order in paragraph 4 is suspended for 30 days in order for the National Assembly and the Minister of Police, if they so choose, to exercise their powers in terms of the provisions referred to in paragraph 3.1 above. Now remember the proposition that was put to you by Mr. Hali, because he was saying to you, despite that the Constitutional Court has set aside the suspension, you still forged ahead and went to Parliament. And your answer was that you're acting in terms of the Constitutional Court order, but you could not refer to a specific paragraph of it.
Right.
And so this is the paragraph that actually then will have prompted you to go to Parliament, because you have said that the Constitutional Court did what, as the lawyers would call it, a read-in.
Yeah. Because
Section 6663 are no longer there. They cannot be used, but you can't leave a vacuum. That's what the Constitutional Court says. And then it says, what can we do in the meantime whilst we're giving Parliament an opportunity to rectify the legislation? It says that we will now read in Section 17DA. Am I correct?
Yes, that's very correct.
And so then you say that you acted in terms of that section, and again, the chairperson will be able to read Section 17DA and see for himself that Section 17DA of the Police Service Act, it actually requires a joint action. That is, now the minister and Parliament must together act then to trigger either a suspension or a disciplinary processes. It can't be you alone. So that's what really then it is saying. Am I correct?
That's very correct, sir.
So you are basically, in your response to Mr. Hali, you're basically saying to him, I've done my part. I've gone to Parliament because I wanted to be complying with the Constitutional Court Order, paragraph 5, which said that Minister, Parliament, you have 30 days, make a decision. Are you going to charge this man or not? And you say you have done your part. What did Parliament do? Did Parliament do its own part?
No, certainly it did not in this particular instance.
Now the question is, can you tell the chairperson what would have happened to McBride's suspension had Parliament done its part?
Look, that suspension, of course, if we acted in accordance with the Constitutional Court Order, the Constitutional Court Order, gave us a period of about 30 days to, Parliament and the Minister of Police, myself at the time when I occupied the position. That suspension would have stayed on, but the decision, perhaps by Parliament, would have been the question of processing the issues of discipline. Okay. Now, suppose the decision by Parliament would have been, yes, let's go ahead and these are the charges and so on, and let's deal with them. So suspension would have gone on beyond that 30-day period, as per the Constitutional Court. In fact, the Constitutional Court Order, the 30-day period was not about suspension. It was about rectify and deal with the procedural issues within the 30-day period and see whether you want to proceed or not proceed with the disciplinary action against Mr. McBride.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, let's move to Dramat, because it was also something which came up during your testimony. Mr. Hali did ask you about your suspension of Lieutenant General Dramat. We know that the Helen Suzman Foundation challenged that suspension of McBride by yourself in the High Court, and there was a judgment by Prinsloo J. You also opposed that application, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
And Prinsloo J came with a judgment. So the only thing that I want to ask you in respect of that judgment, you have had an opportunity to also read it at some stage. Did Prinsloo make any finding that you acted with ulterior motive or malice when you suspended Mr. McBride? Lieutenant General Dramat.
No, there wasn't such a finding.
Again, it was a simple question of interpretation, your interpretation of the provisions of the South African Police Service insofar as the powers of the minister to suspend the head of the Hawks.
Yes. And may I also just state that, Honourable Chair, because this assertion has been made over and over again, that I acted unlawfully, which is a very strong statement by anybody to say. Because acting unlawfully would mean...
suspending General Dramat.
Yeah, but also Mr. McBride.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, because acting unlawfully would actually mean you acted either against the provisions of the law or outside of the law. I think that's what it would mean.
Well, acting unlawfully may mean, depending on the circumstances, I mean, it means your actions were in breach of the law.
Yes.
But there are circumstances where you may act unlawfully but genuinely, believing that you are entitled to act in a certain way, even sometimes with the benefit of senior counsel's advice. Yes. So you go to senior counsel and you say, if I do this, am I within the law?
Right.
It gives you an opinion, it says you will be within your right, you will be within the law if you do this, and it charges you an arm and a leg. You feel confident, you go and do it, and then you are challenged. The court says, no, you acted unlawfully. So sometimes you are genuine. It doesn't mean you are malicious, but it is unlawful. But sometimes it might be a situation where you were malicious or and so on.
No, thank you very much for free education.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But the point for
unfortunately, if he was giving you the advice, he would charge you.
Yeah.
I'm not charging you.
Thanks for that. No, but the point I wanted to make, nevertheless, I'm sorry, Mr. Mkari, if I must have
Yes, fine, you can proceed.
intervened. But the point I wanted to make is that in all these courts and their related sort of cases and processes, there is no court that said I acted unlawfully. And I think
Not unlawfully. You acted unlawfully when you use a provision of the law which the court says is not consistent with the Constitution. What the chair is putting to you is that unlawfully is something, to us as lawyers, is not something that is offensive.
Okay.
But the problem is if you have acted with ulterior motive, malice, bad faith, then that's where the problem comes. So then your proposition should rather be that the court never said you acted with ulterior motive, malice, but unlawfully the court has already spoken on that.
You see, the president and the ministers, cabinet ministers, very often they are involved in litigation and the court says they acted unlawfully. But as long as the court hasn't said the minister or the president was acting maliciously or in bad faith or dishonestly, they accept that it's part of their job. Well, some of the things they do, meaning well, will be found to have been done unlawfully. So it doesn't necessarily, you shouldn't necessarily feel embarrassed if a court says you acted unlawfully, unless it's a situation where it says you were malicious, you acted in bad faith, or you had ulterior motives, then that's different.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
Then I just want to move to the two reports because there was a lengthy engagement between you and the chair, which was quite enlightening. But I just wanted to clarify so that we are clear about what is your thinking around the issue of the two reports. If you remember the engagement between you and the chairperson yesterday, the chairperson was putting a proposition to you and say, look, we have this IP institution which has two reports. And it follows that there shouldn't be really an issue about that because logically, you should simply say that the last report is their final report. And so what is the fuss there? So can we get your clear understanding there in the context of your understanding of what are IP reports there for?
My understanding, which is that our earlier discussion, I'm sorry, I would refer to it as a discussion with the chair, because there are various theoretical points that were being thrown in the air as part of that engagement, is that for me, I think your articulations, they sounded on the general side of things, and I think I must have pointed that one out. But with regards to reports of this nature, which are either criminal or matters relating to police misconduct and so on, they will essentially be based on factual material. Now, the factual material being the material that you find in the docket, and what you find in the docket are statements from individuals that state certain things and perhaps implicating certain people. So that's the strength. And I think I alluded also, Mr. Mkari, to this point that in case there is a material shift, in other words, somebody made a statement implicating X, but then turns around and says, no, actually I was wrong. X wasn't there and maybe I lied and whatever the case is. So that materially registers a different sort of conclusion in a particular way. But it is also to be expected that when you file, whether is it a follow-up or the second report, you would have to refer to the first one, whether you are withdrawing it or annulling it or amending it. I think that's what practice is and so on.
Yes.
So I was trying, Mr. Mkari, earlier on to draw the distinction between constructing what I would call a general report based on, or not so much of a material and so on, as opposed to an investigative report and so on. So I think our engagement earlier on were about that. Yeah.
Yes, but I think but then what you could appreciate from the engagement with the chairperson is that in this type of things, a debate can go on, and you may have different views.
Yeah.
But then the questions that I'm going to, and that's now it is in conclusion, are the following questions which I'd like you to assist the chairperson with. Suppose when you got the two reports, you then looked at them, in your mind you said, I can't have this constitutional institution producing two contradictory reports. What will this send? What message will this send to the public? And you become angry maybe as a minister, or you become furious. You say that I can't have this type of situation. I want to get to the bottom of this.
Right.
But somebody may say that, no, but you're overreacting. There's nothing wrong, man, with what they were doing. But in your thinking at that time, you believe that this can be done.
Yes.
Is that now then, but my question is, if you are found later that in fact you are wrong, you should not have done anything, but you have done something, we know you have done something. In what way will that become a state capture? So that's what I want to, because I know that we're not here in a court of law, we're not here running a trial. We're here in a commission of inquiry which is focusing on a particular issue of a state capture. So can you assist the chairperson in that context?
Honourable Chair, I've always viewed this matter, specifically this matter, not the state capture issue, the matter around Mr. McBride and others and so on, as purely as nothing else, employer-employee relations. Now, it is natural in industrial relations practice that it's a natural thing that there will be disputes that also arise in the employment employer-employee relationship and so on. So this matter to me still remains that. The most unfortunate thing is the manner in which it was handled. I'm now meaning, the happenings outside this particular commission and so on, which I wouldn't want to bore this commission about what happened and who said what, where, and so on and so it goes. But the most unfortunate part was that the consequence of which was that what was due to the public to be known as the actual truth out of this matter, the public was deprived because the mishandling of the whole affair meant that you could not, the processes that were supposed to establish the whole question of what happened to the two reports and so on, and who's to be held accountable for the discrepancies and so forth, never actually occurred, right? So that's why I'm saying the public, members of the public were then deprived of the actual truth about this thing. But the allegations are very serious and they still remain extremely serious. Now, but the suggestions are that, in fact, I also wanted to address the chair about this question of the suggestions of the state capture. Now, Mr. Mkari, the allegations against myself are extremely serious because Mr. McBride came here and said, I captured the criminal justice cluster. Now, the criminal justice cluster, just for your benefit, Honorable Chair, it is the National Defense Force, it is Home Affairs, it is correctional services, it is state security agency, it is the South African Police Service, it is the National Prosecuting Authority. Now, at least at the time when I was there.
And justice? Is justice not part of it?
Oh yeah, justice. Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. And I know why, Chair, you're quick to pick up that justice is not mentioned. I understand that. So yes, and the Department of Justice. So that combination, at the time I was there, I'm not sure now, but at this time I was in government, that was your criminal justice cluster. Now, if you say I've captured the criminal justice cluster, you are then saying, I, as Minister of Police then, I had the power to decide on the issues of prosecution, which is not true. It's not even allowable by law, okay? So, even constitutionally, it's something that cannot happen. It just doesn't. Now, my misgiving, though, at some point was when I was trying to follow in what way did I capture the criminal justice system. My misgiving largely was that that point was not canvassed any further here in the commission to then say, but you're making these allegations that this person captured these institutions, because that means all of them are in my pocket, in a sense. But explain to us as the commission as to how this individual, myself, meaning myself, would have gone about capturing these particular institutions. So that was the one misgiving I had, really, to be quite honest, on my side, to then say, but why is this point not further taken up or something? But I'm not blaming the commission, I'm just making an observation about that.
Yes, well, I must say, I don't even remember it being made. I'm not saying it was not made. I'm saying I don't remember it being made. And probably because it's something that affects you directly, you know, but you don't need to refer me to it because your counsel will be cross-examining Mr. McBride and he will take that point up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just on that point, the Honorable Chair, and I'm sorry for this. In the communication, the initial communication when I was notified by the commission, in the letter, the commission made the following. You improperly or unlawfully sought to unduly interfere in the investigative independence of the National Prosecuting Authority, the Independent Police Directorate, and the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, commonly known as the Hawks. Secondly, you improperly and or unlawfully sought to unduly delay and or decline recommended prosecutions. You improperly, that's the fourth point, or unlawfully sought to participate in the undue persecution of officials in the NPA, IPID, and the DPCI. The last point, raised in the Commission's correspondence, you improperly and or unlawfully sought to destabilize the NPA, IPID, and or DPCI. Now, and therefore my point earlier on.
You are reading from correspondence from the Commission.
That's the correspondence from the Commission.
From the Commission.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say, I don't see all the correspondence that goes out, and actually it's right that way, that I shouldn't see, because otherwise I would not be able to do anything else. But
it's actually referring to the rule 3.3.
3.3.
Yes, no,
Actually, those rules were written. They were written in a standard. It was just a standard thing. Yeah.
But I'm simply saying, I'm expecting that insofar as it was a 3.3 notice, supposed to reflect what is in somebody's affidavit who is said to implicate you. Okay.
Yes, that was my misgiving.
Okay.
Only to then say, but if these are the allegations that are made against me, why these issues could not then, in arising out of testimonies of people that were here, why were these issues not explored to establish the veracity of these particular matters and so on? So that was the only thing. But I just wanted to clarify that point.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, but the question now, after you've read that, the question will be, did you do any of those things that are alleged in that notice?
No, I didn't, Honorable Chair. I have demonstrated, even in the testimony that I led before this commission, as to why I did certain things, what informed me, and what were the enabling instruments for me to take certain positions and or action in relation to certain individuals that got affected and so on. So, at all material times, I acted in the interest of both the law and the interest of the public.
Thank you, Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkhari.
And we're really indebted, Chair, to the Commission and also for giving us the extra 2 days so that we can finish and Mr. Nhleko does not have to do the to and fro.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I think also the Commission is appreciative of the cooperation that both Mr. Nhleko and yourself, leading his legal team, have given to the Commission. Everything went smoothly. There were no unnecessary interruptions as we were going along, and I think that that was good cooperation. So thank you very much.
We appreciate that, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have 1 or 2 questions I want to ask Mr. Nhleko, and maybe one of them is of clarification. You remember yesterday, I think at some stage, I asked you about a situation where a report has been given, but some investigative work must still be done. So, if there are 2 reports, one was provided while there was some investigative work still to be done, and another one was given later when there was no further investigative work to be done. Would you take the first one as final report or the second one as the final report?
I'm laughing at the chair because I think we've been revisiting this question quite a number of times.
It's for the last time,
Yeah,
Mr. Nhleko. It's for the last time.
Right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Again, we would have to go back to the whole question of your second report. What does it intend to do? Is it nullifying the first report? Is it withdrawing the first report? Is it amending the first report? And it is on the basis of that as a responsible authority, you will then take what you think is the necessary sort of position and action for that matter. So that's my understanding, Chair.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
Maybe the question should be, sorry, Sir President, maybe the question should be, what is your understanding of the legal status of the IPD reports? What weight do they even have any legal standing? Or is it one of those reports that, as you say, you have experience in government, which you will ask officials, your managers and so on, to prepare a report. If you don't like it, you can say, go back and draft another one. Do they have any legal standing in the scheme of things?
The IPD investigation reports are very serious reports. Whichever way you want to look at it, but they are very serious reports. And indeed, I that's why I also understand this closer connection between IPD and the national prosecuting authorities because of the weight. I mean, the investigative reports that they produce from from that end. And I think whether it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, the chair was also trying to delve into this question of what is the actual weight of these reports. And I do maintain they are very weighty, they are very important and so forth. Now, I know that the issue has been, is the 22nd January report a final report or not a final report and so forth. And I maintain that it is a final report. In fact, that standpoint is also going to be corroborated by further evidence that's going to be led eventually before this very same commission about the status of that very same report vis-a-vis the report of the 18th of March. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ntleko, for coming to give evidence. As I said, I think earlier this morning or yesterday, the investigations are continuing. There is no guarantee that we can't ask you to come back, but I think we were able to cover quite some ground over the past, over the 3 days. But thank you very much for coming forward. You are excused.
No, thank you very much. I remain committed to my earlier standpoint of assisting the commission.
Yes. No, thank you.
At any given point, if there are matters that you think I can clarify this commission about in relation to this particular matter, I am available and committed to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to, Mr. Halley, I'm going to take a short adjournment because I have another witness to listen to.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to ask that we could be excused.
Yes.
But once you stand down, we'll excuse ourselves.
Well, I think if you are able to collect whatever you need to collect while during the adjournment, feel free, you are excused as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then I will remain with Mr. Noche and a few people here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Unfortunately, the lucky ones will leave and the unlucky ones will remain. We'll take an adjournment up to 10 to 4. We'll resume at 10 to 4. We adjourn. Good afternoon, Mr. Noshe. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Chairperson.
Yes, you can feel free to take your mask off. I'm sorry that you and the witness have had to wait for such a long time. It's been a difficult day, but I appreciate that you are here, and I don't think we are going to take long. So the Commission really apologizes for any inconvenience, Mr. Blake. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, the witness we are calling, the genesis of his evidence is the evidence of Mr. Agrizi.
Yes.
The Chair will remember Mr. Agrizi referred to the fact that there were certain bookings that were made for persons outside Busasa employ, and he gave evidence to the fact that...
I think you should start by saying that Mr. Blake, indicating the relationship between Mr. Blake and Blake's travel, and then, of course, then what Blake's travel was to Busasa and what Agrizi said, and then that connects with how come Mr. Blake is here.
Yes. Chair, I'm just getting there that Mr. Agrizi referred to some travel arrangements and made by a company called Blake Travel, and that these were the travel arrangement and expenses for Busasa, the company, and also travel arrangements that were made for people outside Busasa. And as a result of that, the statement was made and obtained from Mr. Brian Blake, who is before the Commission today to testify. Mr. Blake is the Managing Director of Blake Travel, and is given a statement, and he will confirm the statement, and most importantly, he will also inform the Commission how he came about to also contact the Commission. And his statement and the invoices relating to the evidence are contained in Bundle D. I understand the bundle is before you. And the statement is Exhibit T18. Chair, you will notice inside once you open Bundle D, you will notice that then the index, there's an index, and then outside the index, there's the pagination. The pages start with T15. That, Chair, refers to this exhibit was initially T15, but because of the changes in the previous hearings, it has been moved to T18. And we have kept it as at T15, the pages, just to avoid expense of printing other pages, but the page numbers remain the same. So when we refer to witnesses, we'll refer to BB and then the number.
Well, you remember that when you refer to the pages, we don't even mention the letters, and the zero, we just say page 1, page
the
2,
number
page
itself,
3.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the red numbers
I'm just
at the top.
mentioning to correct the issue of T so that it doesn't throw anyone off.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Chair, Mr. Blake is ready to take the oath, and then we'll take...
Yeah, but basically, Mr. Blake's evidence follows up on Mr. Agrizi's evidence, part of which was that Busasa and other companies under Busasa used Blake's travel agency for making travel arrangements and accommodation. I don't know whether also accommodation.
The accommodation expenses as
accommodation,
well.
and that some of the persons for whom traveling arrangements were made by Blake's Travel were persons who were in government officials, and that some of them and all the traveling expenses that were incurred were paid for by Bosasa, and Bosasa, I think, kept an account with Blake's Travel, and the persons that Bosasa asked Blake's Travel to make arrangements for would not pay Blake's Travel themselves, but Bosasa would pay for their traveling. That's my recollection of.
Yes, that
the
is
evidence,
that is
yeah.
correct, Chair.
Yes, and
And
Mr.
Chair, the Bosasa kept an account
Yeah.
with Blake Travel.
Yeah.
But in addition to the Bosasa account,
Yeah,
Mr. Agrizi also had an account,
yeah,
which later changed to a Fenta account,
yeah,
which, as Mr. Agrizi has testified, it was the name of his father-in-law and
Yeah.
then later his mother-in-law.
yeah,
And then the invoices will be issued for those people,
yeah,
but the payment will be made by Bosasa,
yes.
either in check or in cash.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And Mr. Blakes will correct any of the things that we have said if they are not correct.
Yes.
You can administer the oath of affirmation.
Sorry, Honourable Chair.
Yes.
I'm actually Alderman Blake. That makes a difference. I'm Alderman Blake. I have a title, Alderman. I'm not sure in the legal Alderman.
Elderman.
Correct.
Oh,
Chair
okay.
is a member of the municipal council, of a district council.
What council?
A district council,
A district council.
yes, and they're called aldermen. And
Elderman. Okay, how do you spell it? I just want to make sure, you know, the noise of the aircon competes with
Sorry.
you.
Chair, it's A-L-D-E-R-M-A-N.
Oh, but that's a title.
It's a title like a councillor.
Elderman Blakes.
Yeah, it used to be councillors, but after a certain number of years, you
Yes.
achieve
Okay.
Alderman.
No, that's right. Okay.
Mr. Alderman Blake, Chair, can Alderman Blake move to,
Yeah, that's
or
right.
use that microphone?
I don't know if the other one is working. Just no, it's not working.
Then move
I think
to this
move
chair.
to the other chair. You want to sanitize? I think they want to sanitize the chair first, and the before you do so. Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Alderman Brown Douglas Blake?
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed affirmation?
No.
Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, I truly affirm.
I truly affirm.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may be seated. Yes, continue, Mr. Noche.
Alderman Blake, can you tell the commission what is your relationship between you and Blake Travel Agencies?
My grandmother started Blake's Travel Agency in 1948 after she was mayoress. It was a coal and wood agency which used to sell coal and wood, but after a while the railways came and said, don't you wish to sell rail tickets and sea journeys or voyages back to the UK? my grandfather took over, my father took over, and I took over when my father passed away in 1994. We are part of the SURE group. My father was very instrumental in getting Southern African travel agents together to help get better deals on hotels, cars, flights, and assistance with having a network of 50+ travel agents.
Now, Sir Blake, you know, today your evidence is in relation to the relationship between Bosasa and Blake Travel. When did that start, that relationship start?
In 1999, 1998, Home Affairs asked us for repatriations, sending immigrants or illegal passengers back to their countries. And those years, Dayambu would bring passports and Home Affairs would collect, we had to handwrite tickets those years, collect the tickets and the passports, and we would invoice Home Affairs still on by typewriter. I remember typing out invoices. These passengers were taken to the airport, put on an aeroplane and sent back to their home country. There were a few instances of irregularities. I remember one Egyptian airline passenger running off the aeroplane, endangering traffic and being caught and put in the Kempton Park police station. It was quite easy for Home Affairs those years to take the people from the Lindela captive camp and transport them to the airport to send them back home.
When you refer to Dayambu, you mean Jambu, D-Y-A-M-B-U.
Yes, your pronunciation is more. We called it Dayambu, but I suppose the African word would be
Jambu.
Jambu.
Yes. And that was the previous name of Bosasa, am I correct?
Correct.
Yes. Now, you made a statement to the investigators of the commission, am I right?
Yes, I made
before you made that statement.
You may keep your mic on. It won't disturb anything.
Okay.
Before you made that statement, what had happened between, insofar as the relationship between you and Bosasa?
Well, from 2000, when Dayambu became Bosasa, between 2000, 2002, 2004, somewhere there, we did not make any statements until 2014, when the investigation actually started. And my final, my signed statement was in 2016.
Who took the statement from you?
Sorry?
Who took the statement?
Colonel Smith, Christopher Smith.
Colonel Smith of the South African Police?
Of the Hawks, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And now, how did you come for you to make a statement to the investigators? What prompted you to come up?
Well, in 2014, Colonel Smith came to me with a certain request, and obviously with confidential information. This man walked into my office and asked me for all details on three specific clients, passengers. And I said, well, I can't give you that. Please, you'll have to subpoena that or bring me something from the police. I was duly subpoenaed, and I took the documents to my lawyer, and we agreed to cooperate fully with the Hawks.
And you also state in your statement that, and you know that Mr. Agrizi gave evidence before this commission about relationship between your company and Busasa. Can you take the commission through that, the relationship, the accounts that were opened?
Well, Mr. Agrizi would, travel agency is quite hard to run, it's not simple. People can phone you at all hours, and Busasa did, especially when vehicles broke down and guards needed accommodation. And I think it started, well, slowly, but Busasa began to rely on us because of our, superior travel ability, of being able to accurately get good prices, book people, and when people had to get on a flight, we found seats, different airlines, and it was simple: pick up the phone and book it. We'd get an order number for the official Busasa stuff, or Mr. Agrizi or Mrs. Agrizi would phone me for the confidential stuff.
Did Busasa have an account with Blake Travel?
Yes, we had a running account.
Was one account or many accounts?
We had the Busasa account and we had the Busasa VIP account originally.
Busasa?
VIP.
Yes. What was that for?
That was basically, I think, at the beginning that Mr. Agrizi kept that account for very important persons.
Will payments for the bookings made through the account, who would make those payments?
First of all, it was Busasa paying us with 2 checks in those years, in the beginning years.
Yes.
And then Mr. Agrizi paid with his American Express card. And then it changed to the cash bookings.
Now, you have said to the commission that initially it was Busasa VIP account. Did it change? Did the account change?
Yes.
To what? To what did it change?
It was Busasa VIP to Angela Agrizi, to C. Fenter, to JJ Fenter.
Now, can you turn to the bundle before you, bundle B, page 2.
All right.
Now, paragraph 6 to 9. In paragraph 9, you're telling the commission that after Agrizi's state testimony, you contacted the commission and you told it that there are certain invoices you have in your possession. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you say you handed over the invoices to the commission. Is that correct?
I handed over relevant invoices and documents. There still may be further documents that the commission may need.
Or there are still other documents that may show different people who traveled.
It's very difficult, Judge, because we don't know who works for the state and who doesn't work for the state, or who.
Yes, yes.
We have quite a bit of data, but
yes,
we haven't really had a good investigation, thorough investigation, yes, into it.
Okay. So, but you have documentation, invoices, and so on somewhere, which, if looked into, could well reveal
further
people that have not been mentioned.
Correct.
Okay.
It could be possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you tell the?
I think that must be explored, if possible, to see whether we can't unearth some more people. So that can be explored. Should be explored in due course. Yeah.
Yes. Now, also, Mr. Ray, can you also tell the chairperson about what you did to maintain that record accurate and safe?
Yes, Judge. It's quite a difficult story because we had an investigation with Colonel Smith from 2014 until 2016, till I actually signed the affidavit. And I was ready to appear with Advocate Cook in court in February 2016, and the case just disappeared. Colonel Smith came to me and said, I'll probably testify in 10 years' time, but he's been told the case is now flat. But his direction was for 3 passengers, the 3 mentioned in the report. But there's a lot of other people. We don't know. We don't know if those people are involved or not. What happened thereafter, once Mr. Greasy began testifying, I tried to get hold of the Hawks, and I was told that the original cloning of my server was stolen, it disappeared. There was a guy called Bertus, and eventually I couldn't get hold of Colonel Smith, and I eventually got hold of one of the Hawks in Pretoria, who came out and recloned my computer in February.
February 2020.
Yeah, this year.
Mr. Blake, this is important for the Commission. Just to explain this, you're saying that when initially you were contacted by Colonel Smith, they took and cloned your hard drive so that they could see all the invoices that were made, and they took that away.
Yes, both in 2014 and in 2020.
And then you say that when you made inquiries after Mr. Agrizi testified, you found that that evidence had been destroyed, had gotten lost with the Hawks.
I don't know. I spoke to Colonel Smith again, and he said, no, that evidence couldn't, it's impossible for that to happen. I have contacted him subsequently, and he said that he is locked away with the Supreme Court. That evidence is locked up.
But and then also you say that insofar as that evidence of Colonel Smith, you were conducted and you were supposed to testify as a witness in that case, but in the end you never testified.
Correct.
So the documentation that you gave to Colonel Smith, would it relate to traveling arrangements made under the account of Bosasa, or does it involve other people's accounts with Blake's travel?
Chair, it was specifically for Mr. Mati, Ms. Nchanda, and Mr. Gillingham. Lieutenant Colonel Smith's focus was on those 3 passengers and their families.
Yes.
Obviously, there were other people, but,
yes. But
his focus was totally
all under the Bosasa accounts.
Bosasa or Bosasa Associates. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I think we should try and do whatever we can to be able to see if we can get those invoices so that we can see whether there are people from government that whose names have not been mentioned here, who also traveled and got paid for by Bosasa. So we should pursue that. So you don't have that documentation with you because it was taken by the Hawks?
No, we still have that
You
document.
have got that?
We've still got it. Chair, also I had on the 14th of September, I appeared at a tax inquiry, which also asked me for documentation, which I gave through lots of invoices for them to follow up. There's 40 million rands of travel over 6 years is...
That's involved there.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of...
But
Okay.
also, Mr. Blake, just to also make it just clear, when you talk about the evidence that the police took away, it's just the cloning of your hard drive. The hard drive, you still have the original hard drive.
Correct.
You see.
Yeah, then the investigators should just do something to check how far we can go in trying to get other names of government people or politicians who may have traveled under the Busasa accounts
Yes.
at Blake's Travel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, Chair, when I spoke to Colonel Smith, there were other travel agencies involved.
Oh, is that so?
Yes.
Which were paid for by Busasa, where Busasa had accounts.
There's also Dr. Smith or...
Yeah.
I
Or
remember a receipt made out with no name on it.
Okay.
Or-
Okay. I think that's important. If the commission investigators, you can share that information with them when they talk to you. It should be taken further.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Alderman Blake, can you then, whilst we're on page 2, can you just read it for the record, paragraph 11, where it deals with your operations with Busasa?
Well, it doesn't have to read it, Mr.
Just the.
No, Chair. You can ask him the question. He knows these things. He knows. He knows that it's his business. He has been doing it for a long time. He will just tell you.
From this paragraph, it is clear that the first thing, the main account opened was for Busasa Operations Pty. Is that all right? Is that right? That's correct.
Which was also Pty Limited, yeah?
And from my understanding of your evidence is that was for the operations of Busasa.
The general operations of meetings of people, of detainees, of guards, of accommodation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you say that then there was a second account which was opened in the name of Busasa Operations VIP, the one you talked about, the VIP
Correct.
account.
Correct.
And then you say over the years, then this changed from the Busasa VIP to the personal account of Mr. Agrizi.
Correct. Mr. Greasy asked me to change it to his name.
And then 2009, it changed to the name of C. Fenter.
Correct.
And then 2012, C. Fenter was closed, and then a new account of JJ Fenter.
Correct.
So the invoices you issued, were issued by Blake Travel, will be to these, for VIP travels. It will be to, the invoice will be VIP, and when it changed to Agrizi Fenter, C. Fenter, and JJ Fenter.
Correct.
Now, if you can turn back to the beginning of Exhibit 18, there is an index, Chair.
At the beginning.
At the beginning, there's an index. It says Index Exhibit 18.
Yeah.
There on item 3 to item 22 of that index, what is indicated in those items from 3 to 22?
Why don't we go to the page where they are?
And they start from page.
Is it 56?
Let me before I even go there. Mr. Blake, you have just confirmed that you did issue invoices for a number of people.
Well, you always issued an invoice, Chair. It was standard procedure. It was VAT or non-VAT related. It was always to either one of the companies of Busasa or to C. Fenter or JJ Fenter. The record is quite nice in that sense that it is quite accurate, because on the invoice is also the reference number to the hotel or the car or the air ticket number.
If we take, let's take one invoice, Annexure BB4, starting from page 56 to 57.
I got big fingers, I'm sorry. There we go, okay. We have an invoice number BT 22804.
Yes, on page 57, and this is the invoice is to Mr. J.J. Fenter.
Correct.
And that is,
Let's start by saying it's on the letterheads of Blake's Travel Agents, Pty Limited, is that right? Elderman.
Correct. Yes, Chair, and it's got the VAT number.
Yes, and it is made out to Mr. J.J. Fenter.
Correct.
Yes, you can continue, Mr. Nacho.
and
I
what is
think
this
you can
invoice
go to
for?
the date and so on and the amounts.
And the date of the invoice?
That's the invoice that's tax dated the 27th of January 2016.
And what is the invoice for?
Invoices for accommodation at Sun City, Sun International Hotel, The Palace.
And then who,
I'm sorry. So does this invoice reflect that Blake's Travel had made the booking for somebody to stay at Sun International Hotel, The Palace? Is that right?
You not always, this one is a little different. So remember that I think it was Mr. Glamini who made this reservation and we took it over. Often somebody will say, please just hold the room for us. And then we would phone in and say, right, we're taking over, we need your bank details, we'll pay by credit card or we'll pay you by EFT.
You say it was Mr. Dlamini. Was that supposed to be your client?
Mr. Sivian Glamini worked for
Sivian Dlamini for Busasa.
Correct.
So he had made, initially he asked your travel agency to make a booking.
Take over the booking.
And was that in respect of himself or in respect of somebody else? Do we see
I think
here?
it was first in the name of Mr. Papi, and then
Mr.
it was changed to his secretary, Jade Oren.
Oh, okay.
I presume that was how it...
Okay.
It was a sort of an emergency case where Sun International doesn't just hold rooms, you have to pay them. You know, they're quite very tough on...
Yeah.
And we paid them and we invoiced JJ Fenter who paid us.
Okay. Mr. Nosh.
yes, and then the amount of the invoice is at the bottom is 60,178 rand and 89 cents, am I correct?
Correct.
And then you paid Sun International, and then how were you paid?
I was paid cash by Mr. Greasy from JJ Fenter. All JJ Fenter invoices were reconciled and cash was collected for this.
And then the next invoice is on page 58. Actually, the invoice itself starts on page 59. Is correct? The invoice is in the letterheads of Blake Travels, in the tax invoice by Blake Travel.
Correct. It's our invoice.
Yes, to whom is it invoiced?
To Mr. K. Mokanyani.
And what is this invoice for?
Well, the invoice is to Busasa Operations, Pty Limited, isn't it? It's directed to them.
Correct.
Yeah, but in respect of?
Budget car hire, the car rental.
Yes, for whose benefit?
It says for a Mr. K. Mokanyani,
Okay.
but sometimes the people get it wrong when the
Would
invoice.
that be a miss?
It could be.
Yeah.
Judge, what happens is we would give a voucher through, so there's a whole lot of documentation that goes with this. It's a car voucher. It would then be rented out. The bill would come back to us, and then we would do this invoice after we'd received the bill.
Okay.
So it could be that the car company made the error, and we just did the invoice after that. But the person renting the car would have had to give their ID and their driver's license.
Now, on the following page, on page 60, there's again an invoice by Blake's Travel Agency and to Mr. J.J. Fenter. And this is for budget car, and the description is Ms. K. Mukonyane for the amount of 517.
This, Chair, relates to a traffic fine.
And who paid for this?
It was Mr. J.J. Fent, well, Mr. Greasy through cash to J.J. Fenter's account.
And then the following one, at page 61, is again an invoice to Ms. J.J. Fenter. The driver is Ms. K. Mukonyane, and the amount is 287 Rand.
Again, a traffic fine. Also paid by Mr. Greasy cash through his J.J. Fenter account.
And then the next one is...
You may, I think for the sake of completeness, we can cover the charge as well, to say it was on that date, addressed to so-and-so, in respect of so-and-so, and this was the charge. So it makes it easier to know what was spent on a particular individual if there is a repeat.
Chair, will it also make it easier if, instead of going through these invoices, if the chair were to look at starting from page 32. Page 32 has a spreadsheet of the amounts paid and the people paid, and it then in one place covers the expenses that were paid by Blake Travel and then compensated by Busasa. Now, Chair, this spreadsheet is then backed up by the invoices that I was taking the witnesses through.
Okay.
So it can be safe. If one goes through this spreadsheet, knowing that this is covered by the invoices.
No, that's fine then.
Mr. Blake, just to put it on record, just go to page 32.
All right.
Just put your hand on page 32, and then this goes up to page 55.
Right.
And now, am I correct to say that this spreadsheet is sort of a summary of the invoices that were issued by Blake Travel, and it sets out the service provider, the invoice number, the date of the invoice, the addressee, the person to whom the invoice was addressed, the description of the invoice, and the amount, and then at the bottom, at the right end, it tells the Commission where the invoice is in the bundle. Am I correct?
It's a very good summary, Chair, of the clients that we've identified, but there may be further people on that JJ Fenter account that they've fallen through the cracks that we must just check for.
I see. But for now, what is on page 32 to page 55 is covered by the invoices that are in this file.
Correct.
Now, in order to save time, but still maintain the evidence, I'll just refer you, like you to just to read, you know that there's the item number 1, we have dealt with it, is to demonstrate also for the chairperson. Item number 1, the supplier is Sun International, is the invoice we had looked at. Then there's the invoice number, the date of the invoice, and the invoice your invoice addressed to JJ Fenter, and the description is Sun International Hotel, the palace, and then the number, and then the dates, and then the guest was JD Orex, JD Oren.
Yeah.
And then the amount is 60,178 rand 47 cents.
49 cents. 49 cents, yes.
49 cents, is that correct?
Correct.
And the invoice is the one we went through?
BT 22804.
Yes. And then the next person is Gatleo Mokonyane. And there the supplier is, in all the items, is the budget car. And you have under the invoices, invoice numbers, and then the dates of the invoices. And then the invoices are addressed to Busasa Pty on JJ Fenter. And there are a number of items, and the total amount is 69,497 rand 25 cents. Correct?
25 cents, yes.
Now, Mr. Blake, where the invoices are addressed to Busasa operations, who paid for those invoices after you have paid them?
Busasa would collect all the invoices under Busasa and pay us monthly by EFT.
You paid by Busasa directly?
Correct.
And then the ones for JJ Fenter?
JJ Fenter was also lumped together in months or 2 months or 3 months and paid cash.
I see. And then below that, you have the invoices for Mohammed Murad. Before that, Chair, can we go back to, do you know who's Katla Homukonyane, for whom the Busasa and JJ Fender booked for?
I remember one of the girls in front was saying that they desperately needed a type of a car for the minister's daughter. So she managed to get the car through budget car hire because none of the car hire companies actually had that car that they were looking for. So I guess they sort of knew it was important to get a car for this person because Busasa was really wanting us to find the right vehicle. Yeah.
And then we saw, when we were looking at the invoices themselves, that there were the amounts of 517 and the amount of 287 were fines.
Correct, they're traffic fines. They would come through budget car hire or the car hire company. And obviously the traffic departments find the car hire company and then pass the bill on to us.
And then, but for those, Mr. Agriz paid cash for those?
Paid cash for those, yeah.
And they were not paid by the person to whom?
No, the cash would have been, if there was an invoice for it, it would have been tallied and paid by Mr. Agrisi or Mrs. Agrisi.
Yes, sir.
Cash, yeah.
Now, then the next person is Mohammed Murad. Do you know who this person is?
Not clue. Sorry. I reckon that if I know or if I've met 30% of my passengers from various companies throughout the world. That's doing well. But often companies will ask us to book for individuals. We get a copy of their passports quite often, and we'd make reservations for them, but we'd never meet them. You know, we're in the electronic age now. We're not in the old travel agency, you know, walk in, have a cup of tea and discuss a cruise. It's get me on the aeroplane, get me this hotel, get me that car. You know, it's...
But in a situation like this, where the booking is made under the name of J.J. Fenter,
Right.
who would then give you the name of the passenger or the person for whom the booking is made?
It would generally really come from Mr. Greasy or Mrs. Greasy, and it would either be SMS or phone through, but we would have to check the spelling very carefully.
I see.
Yeah.
And then there is the two bookings, and the amount is 3,351 rand and 44 cents.
Correct.
And then the next item is for Dudumieni and core travelers.
Right.
And these invoices, all the invoices seem to have been made by Mr. J.J. Fenter. The invoices were made to J.J. Fenter.
Correct.
And the invoices on this spreadsheet starts from page 32 up to 33, in the total amount of 101,000 rand 718 rand 3 cents.
Correct. Right.
And then when we look at on page 32, when you look at the description, it says Dudumieni and core travelers. And then there's a description of Sheraton Hotel, PTA, and then guests Dudumieni, Catherine Dawson, and then on the same column is Dudumieni, Duduzeli Mieni, Catherine Dawson, Sheraton Hotel. And you say these names will come from Mr. or Mrs. Agrizi.
Correct. The PTA stands for Pretoria, so that's the Sheraton Hotel Pretoria.
The PTA?
Is Pretoria.
Oh, I see. And then over the page, we see again, there is Sheraton Hotel, Pretoria, Dudumieni, Catherine Dawson. And then the following one, which may explain other items, it has got TIC, like a ticket number, there's a number. That's a ticket number on item 3.
Yes, that's a ticket number.
And then passenger Catherine Dawson, and then route JNB MQP Nelspruit. Is that the route Johannesburg to Nelspruit?
Correct.
And then there are a whole host of other items up to item 22.
Correct.
Chair, I will not waste your time to refer to it, but they are referred there by the witness. And then over the...
I don't remember that you asked me to admit his affidavit.
Chair, I was hoping at the end after he has testified, to confirm the correctness of the affidavit.
Let's do it now.
All right.
Mr. Blake? The affidavit of Mr. Brian Douglas Blake, deposed to on the 28th November 2019 will be admitted and marked as exhibit T18.
It's bundle.
Is it still T18?
It's in bundle D.
No, the exhibit is different from the bundle.
T18.
Yeah, T18. Okay, all right.
Together with the annexures.
Yeah, together with its annexures.
Yes.
Okay. Important to also mark on its face at the top, exhibit T18. Yeah, so that it's known that that is exhibit T18.
At the top of?
At the top of the page, of the first page of the affidavit.
Oh, I see.
Exhibit T18. I think when it's done, so you can mark the one that is with the witness later on. Okay.
Now, Mr. Blake, we were on page 33.
Right.
And then there is then the heading of Trevor Forey at the last entry on page 33.
Page 34.
No, page 33. Start on page 30 at the bottom.
Right at the bottom.
On the
Yes,
blue.
Trevor Free, the heading, yes.
Trevor Forey, and then the invoices in relating to Trevor Forey. They're on
Correct.
page 34, am I correct?
Correct.
And then there is, again, is booked by J.J. Fenter.
I'm sorry. I'm at page 33, but
At the bottom, at the foot of page 33, Chair will notice there is
In blue, Chair.
the entry in blue on page 33.
okay. So I think I will write here because the rest relating to him
It's on
is
page
on the
34.
next page. Trevor Forey. Yes, okay.
Mr. Blake, if one goes through all these, the spreadsheet up to page 55, one will follow is on the blue, is the name of the person who the booking was made for, and then the details of the booking follow that, and then at the end of that column will be then the amount, the value of the entire booking.
That's correct. Yeah.
And as we had said previously, and then that is backed by the invoices that are attached to your affidavit.
Correct.
Now on page 55,
I'm sorry, did you say 55?
yes, Chair.
Can we go back to 35 before we go to 55? Alderman Blake, if you look at page 35, you will see that in the middle you have got the name C. Frolic. Can you see that?
Page 5.
Page 35.
85.
No, 35. On the, look at page 35. Look on the blue, on the blue
Page
separation.
35. 35.
Yeah,
35.
35. Apology. 4. 35. Right.
35, right?
Correct.
Yes. Can you see the name Frolic, C. Frolic there?
Correct.
Do you know, would you know what the full name is, or would you just know C. Frolic in terms of your company with a sample, with a guest?
No, Mr. J.K. Watson told me his name was Mr. Cedric Frolic.
Mr. Cedric
Yeah.
Frolic. That's what you were told when they were booking.
when they're booking, yeah.
Okay, all right.
It should appear on the hotel invoice as well.
Yes, yes.
And,
You don't remember any other frolic that you might have? It's just
No,
that it's
he was
only this
quite,
one.
quite tied up with the Eastern Province Rugby.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, I see that when you look under his name there, there was a booking for him at the City Lodge or Tambo Online Club for the period, for accommodation for the period 10 June 2010 to 12 June 2010. And then the next booking was at City Lodge or Tambo, and guest says Mr. C. Frolic. Then the accommodation then was for 21 August 2010 to 22 August 2010. And then all these bookings appear to have been connected with rugby. The third one is for Frolic C on 10 December 2010 to 12 December 2010. Excuse me. And then the next one is, why does it look like there are three which have the same date? There is the third one is 10 December 2010 to 12 December 2010. The next one is for the same accommodation. The third one is for the same accommodation. Does that mean he stayed or consecutively or on those days, for those days, and if, or there was an extension, or what, why do you have it that way there?
I'm not sure, Chair, we'd have to check that.
Yeah, but you see what I'm talking about.
I see that, yes.
Yes.
Chair, will it help if we turn to page 114?
114.
114.
Okay. Yes.
These are starting from 114, these are the invoices of Mr. Frolic. Am I correct, Alderman?
Yeah.
Starting from 114.
Well, the dates are the same. And I don't know if the...
Look at what the chair is referring you to is
The place is the same as well.
on page, it starts on page 116 and 117. What the chair is referring to is there is the date is 23 December 2010, and the town lodge, Mr. C. Frolic. And at the bottom, if you look at the description, the date is the same.
It could be, Chair, that there could have been more than one room booked in his name. That's why we must go back and check the invoice from the town lodge in George to see why we invoiced. Because we would invoice against a invoice from the town lodge.
So it could be that he booked 2 rooms.
2 or 3 rooms.
Or 3 rooms, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think it would be good if that clarification can be obtained. Okay, all right. Okay, that's what I wanted to check but that, the total for him at that page 35 is 13,990 and 44 cents. Okay, I think we can continue.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, the evidence I've led so far was merely to demonstrate how one can navigate through the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
With your leave, can I take the witness to page 55?
Yeah, that's fine.
Alderman, can we go to page 50?
Okay.
Page 55, and at the bottom, the last entry there is the total amount that was booked for by JJ Fente or Busasa. And that amount, if I say it, amounts to 1,234,481 rand 11 cents. Is that correct?
That's correct. But you must also remember that the JJ Fenter account.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, the Chair, the JJ Fenter account, Greasy actually thought that it was his account.
Okay.
So a lot of his private stuff.
Yeah.
So over the period, it was closer to 4 million than 1.2 million. But a lot of it was, you know, family and
Yes.
not, you know,
Yes.
but there could be stuff that we missed, yeah.
Yes.
But the 1.2 is in relation to people who are not Mr. Agrese's family?
Correct.
And these people, the people who are appearing on the description of the invoice did not pay for this, but Mr. Agrese or Busasa paid for it.
Correct. Cash, yeah.
See. Now, there is also an item that I would like you to tell the Commission about. It's Mr. Agrese, in his statement, he gave evidence to the effect that when there were problems, he came to your company and then actually you deal with it on page 21 of your statement.
What page?
Page 21.
21, okay.
All right.
Yeah, continue.
Okay.
And you say there that you heard in the news that Mr. Agrese says that you came to your company and took 5 computers off Blake's Travel and buried them somewhere.
Yes. Chair, yeah, that had me worried because I couldn't figure out how I could do that. First of all, we've proven that none of the evidence, we still have the evidence on our computers. B, if you do take a travel agent's computer, you have to reprogram it with certain items, and you have to have a certain IP address, and you have to have an email address, and it's just nonsense. There's no way that that could have happened. I just cannot, even my IT expert made a statement to say that that's impossible. No.
Is it possible that certain computers were taken and were buried somewhere, destroyed and buried somewhere, but that did not necessarily mean all that information that was in the computers was lost? You still could get the information technologically?
Chair, I think Mr. Greasy must, that was not his only statement. I heard he also buried computers in Port Elizabeth and a couple of other sort of things too. So I think he forgot. I think he didn't tick the box. Because he might have buried the Basosa computers there, because I know they were changing invoices from what I hear afterwards. But no. You're welcome to have a look at my computers. They can go back, they can check them. I None of my staff remember ever getting new computers. I mean, surely they would know they got a new computer. Just highly, highly unlikely. And welcome to come and check and prove it. And then, why have I got all my invoices? Will you take my server if you wanted to destroy evidence? Yeah. Yeah.
So that should be taken further with Mr. Agriza. That should be pursued with Mr. Agriza to tell him what...
His evidence is refuted by...
Yeah, and hear what he has to say, yeah.
Oh, I see. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think he just forgot to tick the box, sir.
Okay.
You know, he was this and that and destroy this and do this and do this, but, you know, when they raided Basasa in 2006, they didn't come to me, but they took all the Basasa information.
Yeah.
Didn't come to me, only in 2014. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, on page 15 of the record and of your statement, you sort of deal with the issue that was raised by the chair.
On what page?
Page 15.
15, okay. Well, before we proceed, I think I've got to ask this. Alderman Blake, you know, from page 44 to page 50. There are the name LMT appears very frequently. I mean, Mr. LMT, Mr. LM or Mr. RMT, must be appearing, I'm taking a guess, more than 20 times.
Perhaps hundreds.
What must I make of that? That he was traveling a lot under the Busasa account?
From what I understand, Chair, Mr. Mati, as Mr. Richmond Mati, which is as Mr. Greasy referred to him, is actually Mr. Desmond Linda Mati, which was referred to me, plus his history was given to me by the Lieutenant Colonel. It's quite interesting. But yes, very much Mr. Greasy would phone me with the family in Port Elizabeth, the flights to Port Elizabeth, the car hire.
I say 20 times, that might be an underestimation. Might even be 50 times, I'm not sure.
Say it goes to 138 times.
Eh?
138 times.
It appears 138 times.
Yes.
And
the total amount, am I correct? The total amount is 796,867 rand 52 cents.
Is that what?
On page 51.
Okay, what you paid in regard to Mr. MT?
There's probably more.
There's probably more.
Because these are only from 2015. I'm not sure if there's...
Yes, there may be a lot more before that.
Yeah, but at least that amount, yeah.
And I think he left correctional services, if I recall the evidence of Mr. Agrizi correctly, he left correctional services around 2007, 2008, or 2006 or thereabout. But of course, I think it may well be that the relationship between Bosasa and him continued.
I think Mr. Watson relationship
Yes,
is
and Mr.
quite
Boya.
well determined by Lieutenant Colonel Smith back to the
Yeah.
UK. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Mr. Noche?
Actually, whilst you're on that, Chair, it's on page 44, Alderman, you'll see there, the heading is Mr. Lindam T and Ms. T. Njana.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
And then if we turn to page, the reason is the reason why you mentioned those together, were they traveling together?
No, Ms. Nachana is actually his wife, but under custom, Ms. Nachana was advised to me to be a CETA officer as well, working for government. I think the name was still in the passport as Nachana, that's why we
Yeah, you
kept
used it. Okay.
And then on page 51, you then see again Ms. Njana standing alone. And then those bookings, there are about 36 of them. They amount to 172,962.52 cents. On page 53.
What's the total? Page 63.
No, 53, Chair.
53.
53.
Oh,
It's 172,962.53 cents. Am I correct, Alderman?
That was for Ms. T in China.
Mr. T in China, yes. And then again, you see the name of Mr. Lindam T just below the Lindam T, Ms. T in China is T Lebelo. Then their expense goes over the page to page 54, and the amount there is 171,992 rand 6 cents. You confirm that?
Funny, yeah, 171,992.06, correct.
but as you say, it could be more.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
Okay.
Now, if we go back, Chair, to on page 1515, I just wanted to clarify there's an issue which was raised by the chairperson regarding the traveling of Mr. Frolic.
Yes.
You're saying there in your statement that the first 3 invoices were paid by Eastern Cape Rugby, but you say you are not aware of the internal arrangements between them and Mr. Frolic.
There is an email further on which I think sort of says that Mr. Watson didn't want Eastern Province Rugby to pay for it, but for Bosasa to pay for it.
Just repeat that. Who paid for Mr. Frolic?
Originally, it was Eastern Province Rugby.
Yes.
I think the invoice was made out to them.
Yeah.
But further down the line, there's an email from Mr. Watson asking Mr. Greasy to pay for it.
Is the email in this bundle?
I think it is.
Can you look at page 14?
1-4.
1-4.
does it start somewhere?
Is this the email on paragraph 28.6?
Yeah, I mean,
that what you're talking
this
about?
document,
Yeah.
where does it start? Let's go where it starts first, the document. The document at page 13. It looks like it's a continuation of a document, isn't it?
It is on page 14, Chair, he's discussing invoice 27255.
Yes, but what I want is, where does this document begin?
The document we're looking at.
Yeah.
This is his affidavit.
Oh, this is part of his affidavit?
It's on page,
Oh,
it starts on
okay.
page 1, yes.
Okay, and what paragraph?
Now, it's on paragraph, page 14, paragraph, here he's discussing invoice 27255, and then he explains on page, you're on paragraph 28.6. Then he says, in respect of invoice 27255, I have provided the commission with the email correspondence, which is attached as BB111. Certain extracts from the email are as follows. From Jürgen Smith, sent 14 December 2010, 05:11 p.m. to Angelo Agrizi, subject, forward invoice from Shaw Blake's Travel, Pty Ltd, attachments to be email PDF. Then inverted commas, Angelo, Chiki told me that this invoice must also be paid by Busasa. Please advise, Doc. Is that the invoice, the email we're talking about?
Yeah, that was the email where Cheeky was asking those invoices to be paid by Busasa.
Do you know who is being referred to there as Cheeky? Or would you not know?
Cheeky Watson.
Cheeky Watson. Yeah, he is Mr. Gavin Watson's brother.
Correct. From
Yeah.
Eastern Province Rugby.
Okay, so this email was from Mr. Jürgen Smith, who was part of Busasa, addressed to Mr. Agrizi, and telling Mr. Agrizi that Mr. Cheeky Watson had told him that the invoice should be paid for by Busasa. That's what it says, eh?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
And then did Busasa pay the invoice? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We're talking 2010. I would have presumed that we would have had to re-invoice it and change the invoice. So it's, or it could have been that cash was given for that invoice and just squared off.
I see.
We'd have to check it.
I see. And now, and then,
you may not be able to say anything about this. I understood, I think from either Mr. Frolik's affidavit or from someone else's affidavit in this commission, that some of the trips that were being said to have been paid for by Busasa in respect of Mr. Frolik in Gauteng were for him when he came to Gauteng to attend rugby. So, but I see that here, it looks, in 2010, it looks like it was for the Soccer World Cup.
It was for the World Cup.
That was for the Soccer World Cup.
Correct. In fact, there's more documentation that Mr. Nixon asked me for, which is investigating.
Oh, is that so? So could we have that?
I've sent it to him already.
Yeah, is that one of the investigators, Mr. Notch?
Mr. Nixon is one of the investigators, yes.
Yeah, he's looking into that.
Yes, okay.
Okay, all right. Okay.
This is, Chair, on when there was a follow-up on the statement of Mr. Frolik about the traveling
Yes.
to Port Elizabeth and
Yes,
to
yes, yes.
It's the follow-up.
Yes.
That evidence will be presented before Mr. Frolik testifies.
Yes, no, that's fine. Can I also check whether there might be any chance that your records could still have whatever bookings may have been made for Mr. Agrizi? I don't know whether it was in 2010 when he says he traveled to Port Elizabeth to meet with one of Mr. Governor Watson's brothers and Mr. Frolik. If it's 2010, your records could still have that.
Yes, we would have had invoices to it. I did note that in 2010, because it was World Cup,
Yeah, you would still have.
VIP ambassador did not do very much. There was not a lot of activity in 2010 with Bissasa.
Okay.
I think a lot of it was done with FIFA, and
Yes.
I will have records.
You
We'll
might
just have to
You will
check
have
and
the
see
records.
if they were done with us or if
Yeah.
FIFA paid for them. Yeah.
Okay. I think, and the investigators, Mr. Noche, may be working on this, that the trip that may be disputed that Mr. Agrizi talked about when he says he went to Port Elizabeth and met with, I don't know whether Mr. Chiki Watson or
It's
somebody
Mr. Valance,
else.
Valancois.
Yeah, Valence Watson
Valance,
and Mr. Frolik. Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's being followed up, Chair.
Yeah. You may continue.
Yes, and on page 16 of your statement, you deal with the booking of Mr. Sivion Dlamini. Are you on page 16?
Yes.
Do you know who Mr. Sivion Dlamini is?
Yes, I've met him.
Who is he?
He stays in Lock Crescent Street, I think, number 8 or close by there. He's a regular from Bissasa.
I see. And I see there's a booking here, but it was also, the invoice was sent to JJ Fenter.
Correct. So a lot of the bookings that were sort of kept hush-hush were JJ Fenter bookings. They were always bookings that were not put on the Bissasa account
I see. And paid for by
by Mr. Greasy.
Mr. Chris. Now, on page 17 of your statement, then you've got a whole list of people. And you say this is a summary of individuals other than the ones you've testified about, and other than Mr. Gillingham and Mr. Mti, and then you whole list of them, about 16 of those.
Correct. There's 16 people that appear on the JJ Fenter account.
Yes.
So just to go back to Mr. Frolik, I see from your affidavit that some payments for some of his travel arrangements made through Blake's travel were paid for by the Eastern Cape Rugby Union. And I see that on some stage, he apparently deposited or dropped a check himself for somebody that I think he may have been with.
Donation for one of the lady rugby players of the Eastern Province Union.
Yes, yes.
He paid for a ticket, yeah.
Yeah, so some payments were originally made by the Eastern Cape Rugby Union.
Correct.
And then, but later on, Busasa paid for some.
Correct.
Okay, all right. From the top of your head, are you able to say whether there were many that were paid for by Busasa, or you are not able to say?
I'd say, Chair, I think Mr. Daniel Watson, Chiki Watson, he would get his way with the payments, although Mr. Greasy wasn't very happy about it because
Yes.
it would come from his account. But Mr. Greasy would probably be able to verify it more than
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and
Okay.
triple check my books on it.
Okay, no, that's
Yeah.
fine. Mr. Noche?
Yes. And then the rest of the affidavit, you then deal with your interaction with the bookings of Mr. Gillingham and Mr. MT, and those are also covered by the invoices that are attached, and they are also on the spreadsheet. Am I correct?
Right.
So far as Mr. Gillingham is on page 19, you deal with a table that deals with Mr. Gillingham there, is that correct?
Page 19, Mr. Gillingham,
On
correct?
page 19.
Yeah?
Is that the table that deals with the bookings of Mr. Gillingham?
Correct.
And now, who booked for Mr. Gillingham?
Mr. Greasy would have booked for them. I do see one payment was paid by Mr. Mansell, or one or two payments were paid by Mr. Mansell. And others were paid by Mr. Greasy.
Did you receive any payment directly from Mr. Gillingham?
No. No, Chair, we didn't
Chair,
receive
except for the investigations that Chair has indicated, that is the evidence of the witness.
Yeah.
I think you have covered the important parts.
Chair, and also just for the record, the people that are mentioned that are affected by the evidence were given what we term the Rule 33 notices in
Okay.
respect of the witness, of this witness.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alderman Blake, for coming to give evidence and for your assistance to the Commission. We
Chair.
appreciate it very much. We may ask you to come back if there is a need, but we won't bother you if we've got everything. But from what the queries I've raised, I think probably the Commission or the investigators will still be in touch with you. But thank you very much for coming to give evidence. Otherwise, you are excused. And once again, thank you for being prepared to wait for the whole day. But thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Chair. I've been waiting for 6 years to get this thing sorted out.
Thank you very much.
Let's hope we could get it all put to bed here.
Yes, no, that's
Right.
fine.
Thank you.
I think we'll adjourn then for the day. Tomorrow I have 2 or so witnesses at 10 o'clock. So, but for the day we are adjourned. We adjourn.